Thank you. Good afternoon, everyone. It is an honor to be able to present to you all today, and at this particular moment in time at the center of a major fight for freedom. I am a practitioner of a method called Hanna Somatic education, which is supremely interested in the topic of freedom. Indeed, the purpose of our method is to teach individuals liberation through self-knowledge and optimal sensory motor control. The intended effect of this work is freedom from accumulated stress, freedom from our conditioned patterns, and freedom from outside forces that imperil each individual's quest for self-determination and optimal human development. Somatics generally refers to practices that encourage integration between mind and body. And I am a practitioner and researcher of the specific type of somatic work called Hanna Somatic education. And this work was developed essentially as a clinical application of somatic principles and is loosely based upon preceding somatic methods that may be more familiar to you, such as the Feldenkrais method, the Alexander technique, and also incorporates self-regulating principles from the field of biofeedback. And a somatic education technique.
Gabriel, I beg my pardon for stopping you. Could you please make a little bit louder your sound, because our translator cannot hear you well.
Yeah.
Just a little bit louder.
Is that any better?
Is it better, Dmitro?
Is that any better?
Can you say something?
Let me see if I can switch to my...
Okay, I'm going to switch to my computer microphone. Is that any better?
Пане Дмитро, так краще? Чуєте доповідача?
Can you hear me better now?
I'm just
Testing.
Yeah.
Testing. Checking.
Checking, yes, exactly. A second. Пане Дмитро, ви чуєте доповідача?
Is that better? Testing.
Вже краще?
Testing.
Ага. Все, чудово. Тоді я... Поїхали, так? Да? Чудово. Зараз повернусь, бо я між кімнатами нашими. Так. Yes, please continue. Everything is fine with voice.
Okay, wonderful. Can you still see my slides?
Yeah, perfectly.
Okay, wonderful. So, yes. So this is a combination of preceding methods of somatic education used for clinical application. And at the heart of this method is the voluntary and controlled activation of an innate physiological behavior called pandiculation. Now, pandiculation is something that all organisms reflexively do. In fact, each organism does it in its own unique, stereotyped way. You'll recognize this as a yawn in humans, or if you have a pet, you'll see this in your dog or your cat many times a day. Now, as I mentioned, pandiculation is understood to be an innate pattern of self-regulation. It is initiated by the hypothalamus and carried out by the motor pathways via the brainstem to help maintain homeostasis. Pandiculation helps regulate the sleep-wake cycle, which is why you will see animals do it every time they are transitioning from a state of rest to activity, and then back to a state of rest. In humans, pandiculation has shown to help shift brain states from a default resting state to an active, attentive state. And it is similarly activated when we are bored, tired, or transitioning to sleep. Let's pause for a moment. I want to invite you to experience this. If you've been attending this conference all day, then you may find yourself getting a little bit sleepy. Or if you are like myself, located on the Western Hemisphere, you might need to wake up a little bit more fully. So let's take a little moment to pandiculate. At this moment, I'm not going to give you any specific instructions other than to let yourself yawn. Take a moment and let it build and move through you as much or as little as you need. And if you need prodding, you can simply look at the monitor and your mirror neurons will help to take over. Once it is initiated, you will find that to yawn is sort of a natural process. And so just let it work its way through you. Okay, thank you. Back to my presentation. It has been theorized that one of the purposes of pandiculation is to help recalibrate and reorganize the myofascial system towards optimal functioning. So you will notice that animals in the wild, they don't spend an hour a day in a yoga class, they don't get deep tissue massages, yet they can maintain full function all through adulthood. You'll also notice that animals in the wild, they don't just roll out of bed and go right to their computer to work. They first pandiculate. Now, while much of what we know about pandiculation was gained by observing animals pandiculate spontaneously, the technique we use in Hanna somatic education deliberately and voluntarily evokes pandicular behavior. There are two essential physiological concepts that are important to understand before explaining how HSC practitioners use this technique. The first is the concept of resting tone. When you stand up, when you lie down to sleep at night, your muscles relax only to a certain point. There is a baseline level of tension that is maintained by innervation from the brainstem and spinal cord, as well as the stretch receptors in the muscles. Resting tone helps maintain the integrity of your myofascial system. And as we age, the repeated activation of stress reflexes creates the condition where your muscles continually contract without resolving back to complete rest. This unresolved tension starts to accumulate, gradually raising the resting tone. And the resting tone can elevate until even at rest, we can maintain a high level of tension. This creates a second key concept, which is what we call in somatics sensory motor amnesia. When people develop stiffness, chronic tension, and corresponding chronic pain, their nervous system learns to maintain a diminished range of motion and an elevated resting tone. The phenomenon of habituation and desensitization kicks in, and as the person becomes stuck in a pattern of tension, they can habituate to that level of tension and become desensitized to it, meaning it is no longer consciously felt. They develop what Hanna somatic practitioners refer to as sensory motor amnesia. The lack of conscious awareness in the area of habituation corresponds with a decrease in voluntary motor control over that area. The stretch receptors, the spindle cells particularly, they adjust to maintain that contraction level automatically. And this shortens the effective muscle length and reduces the range of motion. So there is diminished capacity for both sensing and moving. Now, what does this look like? The signs of sensory motor amnesia are typical signs of aging: a stooped, arched, or rigid posture. Scoliosis also, especially that develops after an injury, and limitation in movement along with pain and or discomfort. From the conventional medical perspective, most of the musculoskeletal conditions people experience are idiopathic, meaning they have no obvious cause. And I would submit that from the somatic perspective, that cause is well known. It is our theory that the combination of sensory motor amnesia, along with an elevated resting tone, causes the chronicity of most musculoskeletal conditions. The person feels pain, but cannot sense how contracted they are, and therefore cannot voluntarily relax that contraction all the way to rest. It's as if their thermostat is set to 27 degrees Celsius in their house. Their radiator, their heater, is pumping out hot air, and yet all the person can experience is that it's hot in the house. So since sensory motor amnesia is a decrease in voluntary movement correlating with a decrease in somatosensory awareness. The remedy for this is an increase in voluntary movement. We have to re-engage the motor cortex to inhibit the subcortical processes, thereby resetting the resting tone and reestablishing somatosensory awareness. And this is precisely what a voluntary pandiculation does. The use of this technique creates a positive feedback loop whereby voluntary movement is initiated. Sensory feedback flows back to the cortex, and through repetition, the person learns to connect the movement with the internal sense of the movements. Then they can start to modulate and reduce their tension and pain. The voluntary pandiculation technique allows the person to control and lower their own internal thermostat setting, thereby regulating their tension levels back to comfort. Now, Hanna somatic education has been around for over 30 years, and for most of that time, we were reliant on our personal experiences for overcoming debilitating pain and musculoskeletal conditions. Finally, the research is starting to catch up. Just this past year, in fact, we had 2 studies published documenting the effectiveness of these techniques. The first study involved a questionnaire we sent out to over 100 certified Hanna somatic educators. Practitioners were asked to share this survey with their clients, and we received 130 responses. Here are some of the takeaways. First off, 92% of respondents, they sought out Hanna somatic education to treat a chronic musculoskeletal condition such as pain, such as back pain, neck pain, or shoulder pain. 85% of them had been suffering for at least 3 months, and 63% had been suffering for over a year. On a 0 to 5 scale, their severity of pain showed a 44% reduction. And that was with typically 5 sessions. We also found that these results were independent of the number of sessions or the amount of home practice they did to maintain the work. Secondly, a colleague of mine, Shiju Huang, did a study with 100 medical staff at a health center in Saudi Arabia. All of the participants were suffering chronic pain and self-assessed their lower back and neck pain on a 0 to 5 scale prior to starting Hanna somatic education sessions, and had a follow-up after completing their sessions. Participants on average had about 2.5 sessions. Here are some of those findings. On a 0 to 5 scale, their lower back pain reduced 81%. Neck pain reduced 80%. And these findings were highly significant. At a 6-month follow-up, those suffering lower back pain reduced their medication use, 87%, compared with 73% for neck pain and 61.5% for lower back and neck pain. And then lastly, at a 6 months prior to receiving the sessions, participants had on average seen a doctor 2 times to treat their pain. In the 6 months after completing their sessions, on average, they visited a doctor 0.5 times. So that was an 84.3% reduction in medical visits for people with lower back pain, compared with 83.3% for people with neck pain and 61% for people with lower back and neck pain. We're currently in the process of 2 more studies. These are going to be prospective studies that will be of people going through online, a series of online group classes for Hanna somatic education. And I'll be very excited to see those results and to share them when they are available. So let's talk about how to voluntarily pandiculate. Here are the keys to this technique. First, movements are done slowly, and they're done to integrate parts of the body that the person still has good control and connection with the parts that they have lost control over, the parts that are amnesic. This typically means that a movement is initiated in a distal area, such as the hand, the arm, or the foot, and they are connected with a proximal area. Sensory motor amnesia tends to develop a lot in the torso, in the back, trunk, pelvis. So through this focused movement, the person gradually raises the level of contraction from an imperceptible level to a perceptible level. Then there is the slow, gradual release, inhibiting the spindle cells to fire, thereby lengthening the muscle before and beyond its previous resting tone. With repetition, the person gradually learns to restore their own muscles to their full resting length and recalibrate their own myofascial system. Once learned, the person can recreate this on their own and enhance the benefits over time. And this is why I believe that 2 or 3 sessions can often be enough. Not only will they benefit in session, but what they will be learning to do is to continue the work on their own. And so they will be less and less dependent on their practitioner and more able to take care of themselves on their own. There are a lot of other particulars about it, and there are certain protocols that we learn of how to apply these, but that's much more than I can explain in 15 to 20 minutes. And I'd like to share a brief experience of this technique. So I welcome you to join me. If you would, I want you to sit up, straighten your chair, and actually move towards the front of your chair. Or better yet, if you're able to, you could stand up so that your arms are free to drop down by your sides. Now I want you to focus on moving just one of your hands. Start by slowly and smoothly turning your hand inward and then outward. So just pick one hand and just rotate it. Demonstrate a little bit here. Just turn that hand inward and then outward. Do this with control the entire time. Okay? Easy enough, right? Just turning your hand in and out. Now, shift your attention from your hand to your elbow. And I want you to rotate your elbow inward and then outward with that same amount of control. If you do this with your arm relaxed by your side, just drop down. If you do this, you'll notice that your shoulder will also be moving. As you turn your elbow, your shoulder will tend to protract. And as you turn your elbow the other way, your shoulder will tend to retract. Okay? So the next time you rotate your elbow, deliberately move your shoulder so that you are rotating the entire arm inwards and then outwards. Then I want you to add in the hand movement so that your whole hand, elbow, and arm is spiraling. And lastly, I want you to connect the movement of your hand into your center. So as you rotate your hand, your elbow, and shoulder inwards, I want you to sink and gently flex your center. Bring yourself upright as you relax your arm. And then as you roll your hand, elbow, and shoulder outward, lift your heart and gently arch. Relax your back as you relax your arm. And now go back and forth, moving in one direction, releasing out of it with control before going into the other direction. Sense how the movement of your hand connects up through your entire limb and into your center, your core. Sense how the tension levels in your back and abdomen increase or are connected to the tension in your shoulder and arm. And therefore sense how they can increase and decrease in connection with each other. The resulting effect is likely that your arm will feel lower than the other arm, will hang more relaxed. And perhaps your back and shoulder may also feel more relaxed. Perhaps they may feel warmer or more connected to you. Take a moment and consider how your arm that you worked with feels and the side you worked with feels compared to the other side. On your next break, I welcome you to do the same with the other arm. And I want you to consider that if you are feeling effects from this, that it is not magic. The results of this are the results of the innate gift of your nervous system, that you have this capacity to direct your conscious attention to changing your own physiology from the inside. This is the power of voluntary pandiculation and Hanna somatic education. I thank you for welcoming me here, and I thank you for your time, and I welcome you to reach out to me if you'd like to learn any more about this, and enjoy the rest of your conference and be well.